So last time when we are trying to go with MVVM architecture, and we found that few things in order to make things work, especially with the view model in this scenario. Okay, we have looked into how we can define a simple view model, but uh, we did not have time to do the two-way binding. So we'll focus on today's lectures how we can do the two-way binding. So before we go into two-way binding, if you guys can remember when we are trying to do last time, we encountered an error. Let's look at the application first. Emulator is starting. So we had the issue where the binding, as we expected, did not work. So there is a solution in order to achieve, in order to avoid that as well. Let's see within today's lecture how we can get over it. MVVM test, it is breaking, maybe because of the changes that we have done. Let me change that. Try to run it again. Look at guys. Okay, probably with the layout we have added. Let me get rid of that layout as well. Control X, Command X, Command V. Let's try it again. Yeah. So if you guys can remember within the application itself, what we have done is when we are clicking on this button, it's gonna just increment our count. Okay, in here we have increment the count. If you go to the main activity and if you look at the main fragment, and if you go in the main fragment within the activity created lifecycle hook, what we are doing is we are binding is this count button now. But if you guys can see that the binding that we are doing is based on the finding view by ID. Okay, this is okay for some point, but we'll be seeing how we can get over these find view by ID sections, and we can do much more simpler way where we can bind elements without using this view and find view by ID mechanism. Okay, we'll see that in a moment. Right now, what we are doing is we are increasing the count that we are seeing here. But in the text view, we haven't put anything in here. But if you guys can remember, we can do like text view, text equal view model, and score. Score is the value that we are referring. Since we are referring as a string, we want to make sure that we are using the string literals, double quotation. Okay. Which might be optional. Okay, if I run this again, and now what will happen is whatever the value that we are typing in, it will increase the count in here. Okay, So that is like the basic idea around it. But the problem is we are violating one of the main key principles or key things that we are trying to achieve within the MVVM architecture. That is, we are directly reference a variable. We are reading from the view model itself. Okay, so if you guys can remember once again, we can send actions, we can interact in with the view model in a unidirectional way. That means either we can send or we can receive. But what we are doing here is we are receiving the value of score. We are receiving it here, and we are calling back into one of our views, and we are listening to that. So that is not the best behavior. That is not the expected behavior of the MVVM architecture. So how are we gonna do? How are we gonna make this one way or unidirectional data mining? So really simple. That is something that we need to do with MVVM itself. Okay, so when we are looking at this pattern, if you guys can see that we have something called private score. Okay, we know that is private because we have defined the keyword in here, and we have also donated the underscore mark in here. And when we want to get that value, we have a public value like this. It is called score. And when we want to get it, so we are just referring the private variable that we are having in here. Okay, so that is simple. That is working as expected. Now what we'll do is we will convert this at least this method to get our data in more observable manner. Okay, so what we will do is we will use the terms live data in here. So we will looking into how we can convert into an observable. So next thing that we need to know some terminologies in terms of the observable pattern that we're going to be using it. So if you guys, how many of you have heard about the term observability? How it's like used? Do you guys have any idea on that? What is the difference between observability and have you guys done anything related to observability? Anyone have any experience on that? Please raise your hand. Otherwise, I need to explain observability. What do you understand by observability? Okay, right. So yeah, so we first thing that we need to do, need to understand in here is, as you can remember within the MVVM architecture, the arrow which representing from view to from view model to view, it is a dotted line. That means we are not directly communicating with the value itself. It is going to be an observable value. That means if whenever it is changed, we're going to be listening to those changes. Okay, so what do you understand by listening to changes? So what we are doing in here in the view model get score, that means we are directly communicating with this value. Okay, so whenever the score is updated, we have to make sure to assign it again. Okay, we need to have assign it again. That's why when we click on the count button and we increase the value of the score, and we have to assign it again and get the value and update it ourselves. Okay, so we are not observing the value for the score changes, we are referring to it. Okay, so remember the difference between in here. We are referring to the score value right around when when we have done some change to the score. So by calling the view model increase method, it will change the value for the score, but we have to listen. We are not listening to it, or we are not looking at it. We are referring it back. Okay, whatever happens, we are referring it. So the downside of this method is, first one is we are violating. The second one is we don't know how many places that these count going to be changed. Okay, we can't only guarantee and say, okay, by only clicking this button or by only calling this method, the score will be changed. Okay, we can't guarantee that. So what we have to do is we have to come up with an idea. Okay, whenever this score get changed, okay, whenever this score get changed, let's update this text views, whatever the content is. Okay, so we have to update whenever this value has changed. Let me go to the fragment first, and this is this text view, right? On it's the size, text size. Let me increase like 50 dB. So it might be a little bit easy to see. Okay. Okay. All right. So whenever we are changing, we have to change. We have to update this text view. So what we're gonna do is, this model is not gonna work. We have to make this score. We have to make this value an observable value. Observable value in the sense, reactively, whenever we are changing this value, the listeners, people who are interested in this value, will be automatically notified. Okay, this value has changed. Okay, so you don't have to ask it every time, like what we are doing in here. We are proactively saying, okay, this value has changed. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want with that. Okay, we are proactively sending. Okay, this value has changed. Now you have to change it yourself as well. So how are we going to do that? What are the mechanisms that we can that we can use to achieve this functionality? So the first thing that comes in out of the box of the Android implementation, at least the Android X implementations, something what we called live data. Live data. Okay, so we have to make things with live data. So what I will do is, I will make this score into a live data text. So it's really simple. All we have to do is make the type of this score into live data. And live data is taking what is counting on what is the type of this value. So this is going to be an integer. And what is the default value that we're going to be looking at? It's going to be this score that that we are interested in. So live data is coming from none other than our import package. If you look at this, live data is coming from somewhere called Android X lifecycle. Okay, so what is the live data int? Found int. Okay, so we have made our score variable into a live data, but it is complaining, okay, this score is type of int, but we need something with live data to be initialized. So when we are initializing something, and we have mentioned that is going to be a live data, it should be in form of a live data. But now what we are trying to give is, it's going to be a simple integer. So we have to convert this value, the private value which containing this, into a live data as well. So how are we going to do that? So we have a special case, a special scenario, or special type, let's say. We have the type called mutable live data. Okay, we have this mutable live data, and mutable live data, it is also taking value itself. And when we are working with that, we have to apply a single value. So it's gonna have two things. One is the value, which in this case the default value. So what I have done in here is that the live data, the underscore uh, variable called score, I have converted into a live data value. And this apply method, it is like when we are like calling this functional or within the initialization, what we will do is we will give a default value for this um, for this uh, live data or mutable live data instance of number 0. We can give it whatever the number we like. If we want 1 or 2, what is the initialization value that we are looking into, we can give that value. So what we have done here, we have converted our score into a mutable live data. Okay, now it is no longer accessible directly. It's going to be an observable live data. So that means we can't directly have this. We have to observe it and take the value. So this, what do you understand by this keyword value? That is something out of the box we use in any observable. So for example, if it is going to be a string, the default value or whatever the value, whatever the data that it need to be holding is going to be stored in a variable called value. Okay, so this value is not a keyword or something like that. It is a default variable which holds the whatever the data that you want to store within this mutable live data. Okay, so this is not a variable. Again, it is the name of the variable that's gonna hold everything. Okay, so if you are referring back whatever you want to set it or whatever you want to do, you have to make use of set value method within the increase function. Let's see how we can increase this function. So in here now, what if you want to change this, we have to say score dot value into let's say underscore value plus 1. Score value, okay, it might be null. So we have this default mechanism, or we can just say value dot plus, which will add a value as well. So now if you look at the lockat again, let's see how it is gonna changing. I refreshed. Now if I hit count, now you guys can see that it's no longer showing the exact score that we are referring, but memory reference. That because this is no longer in basic integer value. It is now a mutable live data value. So if you want to get that value, again, likewise, like what we have done here, we have to use this value property. We need to call whatever the variable name and dot value in order to access the inside value. Let's restart it again. Now, if you guys can see, when I hit the count button, again, this score get updated because we are setting the value itself. So if we start from like 8, and let me restart, and if I count it again, you can see it is starting from 9. Okay, because it was earlier 8, now we have increased the value and we have logged it out. Okay, so from basic value accessing, like what we have done with the integer value access or something like that. Now what we have done is we have converted this variable into a observable value. Okay, now this is what we call an observable value. Okay, so the beauty of observability is whenever we want to listen to this, it will be automatically changed whenever some function is called around. Okay, let's see how it is done. So anything that you guys did not understand converting a normal variable into an observable? Anyone have any doubts? Anything to clarify? Okay, I hope everybody understood. So we have set the initial value for the score, and right now make sure this immutable live data is always private. Whenever we want to access that, we are using this public variable. Okay, we don't access this directly from out of the this private variable. There is a reason, we will go into that, why we can't use this to expose the values. Okay, default value is 8. Now we have set it up. Now in the view itself, we need to find, okay, whenever that thing has changed, make sure we update the value for the text view as well. So how we're going to do that? It is something what we call the observability. Okay, we will use something called observability. So what we can do is real simple. We can say view model. We have this score and we have this. We can go with value. Let's go with value and see what happens. Text view text equals whatever the value we are getting, and we have to make it to string because we are getting an integer value. Now we are not sure whether it is not integer, so we will do this and restart, see what happens. Now the initial value has 8. Okay, initially it is 8, but if I count it again, the count goes up, but nothing changes. The behavior is expected. Why? We are referring view model score and its value. So the default value that we have set is 8, and it gives 8, and make it to a string. Sorry, make it to a string. Put it in the text view. Nothing happens. We are not observing the changes for the score value. So what we need to do is we need to say, hey, we are not interested in the initial value or whatever the value that you are offering. We are interested in whatever we are changing. So we have to say, okay, we are observing your values. We are observing whatever you have to offer. So in this scenario, what will happen is we will be observing the value that the variable or the what do you call the values that we will be sending. So we will be looking at something like okay, you send whatever the values that you have, we'll be observing those things. Okay, and next thing that we have to do is we have to, okay, we will be observing lifecycle owner. What I'm missing? Do I need something else? Observe lifecycle owner. This is the observe. Okay. Okay. So next thing is we have to give the lifecycle owner who is going to be owning this lifecycle change, and whatever the value that we're going to be getting, it is going to be called IT. If you guys can remember, you can change the default name, but by default it is called the IT or it. So whenever we are changing a value, we can observe it in here. Okay, so what we are saying is within the view model, you will find an observable variable called score, Now we observe that value with this lifecycle owner. The lifecycle owner itself is this context. The next parameter that is going to be is whatever the values it is going to be sending us back. So we will say the value is coming. So we can say text view dot text. It's going to be it dot toString. It in the sense in here by default it is it, but you can send it to whatever like you can say like score, and you can say int, but let's go with the default value. It's going to be it. You can see it in here. So it to string. Since text view is going to be like not sure whether it is going to be binded, and we have made it very simple. So we can convert this into a lambda function really easy. If you click on here, move to a lambda function. Okay, with the lambda function, there are less of curly braces and everything. You can easily make very short views. Now let's restart the application and see what is going on. Now you guys can see whenever I am pressing the count, it automatically increase the count as well. That's because we are listening in here, whatever the value score is going to be changing, we are listening in here. And whenever it is changed, it will be updated the text as a whole. Okay, so we can do crazy things with this. We can have increase and we can have a decrease button as well. Then let's so the view model dot decrease. We can say we can have decrease button as well as in here. Then what will happen is if we say decrease, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be the same same score dot value is going to be changed with whatever the value that we are referring. And the best part is you don't have to listen. If you guys can remember earlier on, we have listened to every time we are doing a change. Right now, we do not listen to that. We listen to something in a single way. So anywhere within this view model, if we change the action, change the value of this score, it will be automatically reflected on here, and it will change that text. Okay, so this is what we call the observability. Okay, we are not directly referring anything, we are observing the values, and we are not referring this score variable that it is not referring values, which value it contains, but it is observing its changes. Okay, remember the difference. If you guys can remember, let me do the text view dot text equal view model dot score dot toString. Okay, so by looking at this, by seeing this is not observability, this is a reference. We are referencing, but in here we are doing observability. We are listening to the changes. Okay, that is the difference between in here we are sending a value, we are instructing the straight line that we have seen in the MVVM diagram, and this is the weak line that represents the MVVM observability. Okay, so up until this, do you guys have any questions? Do you need any clarification on how we're going to be looking at this? It's really simple, the most simplest form of all. So we have only looked at view and the view model itself, nothing fancy.
So observability is the up arrow, right? In the MVVM model?
Yes, let me share. Where is the... Okay. MVVM architecture and storage.
So we can't see
Yeah,
the.
sorry, let me share it on again. I'm not sure I can copy the image and show it in here. They should have built-in something like that. Let me share Chrome, yes, Chrome. Mm. Give me a second. Yeah. So you guys can see Chrome, right?
Yes, sir, we can see.
Let's go to images, and there you go. In this in this what do you call the diagram? So this UI event, the UI event that we are triggering in our Android is the increase, view model dot increase. This is the UI event. So observable response in here is the observability, the live data that we have put in. Now, so you guys can see that this is not an observable. This is a direct event that we are firing. In response, we are not directly referring, but we are observing this value. So this is the observability. This is the action or event that we are sending. Make sense?
Yes, sir, thanks.
Okay. So remember this carefully. This pattern applies for any MVVM architecture that you will find. Okay. So if you are using iOS, if you're using Flutter, if you're using what do you call React Native, whatever the framework that you're going to be using, you can't uh, define the observability of, if you can't break the observability law. Okay, you have whatever the libraries that you're going to be using. In iOS, we have library called Combine. We can use Combine to make sure the observability is there. In if you are using, so if you right now what we are using is Android built-in live data or live data library that we have, that Android X gives. But there are other libraries as well, which are like RX Java or RX Kotlin, whatever the RX reactive streams, whatever the libraries that is supporting observability, you have to use that. Okay, in Flutter, we have RX Dart. RX Dart support live subscriptions and all those things. Also built into Dart, there is a subscription and observability. You can use that. So whatever the mechanism that you'll be using, you have to make sure observability is there, actions are fired. That is the only requirement for the MVVM architecture. Okay. All right. Any questions up until this? No? Okay. All right. Let me show one other thing which we are calling something like we call this mechanism called bindings. Okay. So in here, even with this approach, you are what we are doing is the view itself. The view itself is we have to find the text view, and we have to go for the on click listener, and we have to do these things by ourselves. We need to do that by referring these variables from our Kotlin files.
Sir, can you share the editor?
It's not showing the editor.
No, sir.
What is wrong with this thing? Okay. Would be this. Okay. You guys can see it or not?
Yeah, we can see.
Nice. So we can do much more better in this architecture. So what is the thing that we'll be looking at? It is something we call bindings. Okay, these view bindings, we can even further reduce the number of lines, or further reduce the number of codes that we're going to be writing within the Kotlin itself. Let's see how it is done. So let me go. First thing is view binding. Right. There are a couple of things that we need to do in order to make sure the bindings works. The inflators and everything, it's going to be a little bit different. Okay. Okay. Let me get. Okay, first thing that you need to make sure is this is a new feature or kind of what do you call something recently introduced, not recently, but little bit while ago. So if you are using the latest version at the time of this recording or this lecture, you will be perfectly fine. But if you are using a much older version, you have to make sure you are using Android Studio 3.6 or like a very old version of Android Studio. It's not even here. So, but what I am using is a really recent version. So I'm all good. Make sure it is this greater than 3.6, but into the safe zone, make sure you are in the latest version. Okay. So next thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go into a build.gradle file, which will be going to be the module one, not the application one. And within the Android section, what you will find in here, Android section, make sure you enable this this property, which is called view binding. Yes, view binding. And the different implementations have different ways. You can say any enabled, and it is going to be true. Okay, so make sure this view binding enable true is done, and you have maybe you have to sync it up. Might be taking a little bit time, but let's see. Okay, think it is done, and the next thing is probably you have to go to build and clean the project and build and make the project. That's because in some cases what I have found is it is not generating the class that we needed. So in order to make sure everything is good, we need to make sure that we follow that. And yeah, so by now what should happen is, if everything went right, okay, so it is, sorry, it should be build features, not view binding, build features, view binding true. So there are like different ways that we have to do. View binding. Give me a second. I need to like clarify this. Gesture view binding. data binding, enable view binding. Let's see. Anyhow, we have to sync it. Problem is they change this quite often. We have to make sure we nope. I think if I'm not mistaken, one more thing is data binding enable true. Sync this up. Okay, Gradle sync in progress. We have to clean the project and we have to build it again. I think it should be data binding by default. Yeah, it is data binding enable true. So how do we know that is true? If you go into your project view and under Java, there is something called generated. And in here, you will find a couple of files that you've been you will be seeing in here. Okay, so that way we know the binding has the generation has happened. So make sure data binding enable is true. Otherwise, this won't work on the first place. All right. Okay, next thing that we're going to be doing is that we're going to go and try to make this view binding enable. So how do we make sure this view binding is also working as expected? So very simple. If you go into your class itself, we have something called main. We are in the main fragment. Okay, we will get a class called let's normally name it as late init var binding. Okay, the binding, it's gonna be a type of main fragment. Activity main, sorry, fragment, maybe it is the other way. Fragment. Yes, binding. Okay, let's think I can do other way around. Let's see. View model provider. Likewise, we can use data binding, data binding utils, set content view. It's going to be type of activity is this. I'm sorry, context. And the type is r dot layout dot fragment main view dot next binding. Let me see. Give me a second, guys. Binding view is fragment. Okay, since this is in layout later and dot layout dot fragment main. And we have to come up with the is the activity so on create view we have to find this within the inflator. Okay, inflate inflator we have inflator in here and the inflate method, then the container. Container. Here we have the container inflate. And we don't need the attached to parent. False. It's gonna be on a type. Expected view data binding. Okay, we don't need this. We call this on create. Okay, okay, first thing is right. Fragment. Okay. They have changed the inflator. I have to look into why. That's the issue with Android. They are quickly changing everything. That is that what we learn today is outdated by tomorrow. Okay, I think I can just ignore this for now. But place data binding utils in plate. It's gonna be the type of local variable, let's say binding. Okay, let's go with the binding, and we will call this binding as what do you call I mean, give is let me check the documentation first, otherwise it will view binding Android data binding in fragments. binding. We have another project that makes more sense to use. Open project is Komi. Let's see whether it is changed. View module fragment. Okay, there you go. And create attached to root. They are not complaining in here. Not sure why. Oops. And Road Studio, come back. Not enough information for the type T. Fragment. It's only working it. I'm not sure. Anyone have idea why the binding is not accessing? Inflate. Oh. Fragment. Give me 1 second, guys. I go to build data binding. So that is done. Module. Fragment. Yes. Binding should be binding dot root. We have to return. Build the project. Not let me check. On create view. Not enough information, right? It is saying not enough info. Information to in type variable T. Putting up information to in should be the type. The type is something we need to be aware of. The binding type should be fragment. Fragment. Let's see the generated class, whether we have it generated already. Data binding implementations. Okay, bindings. The binding has not happened exactly. I mean, if we have the binding correctly, where we should have a fragment based binding. It is not in here. Let's see why it is not generating. Okay, that's might be the case. Close all tabs. That's good. New things that I have to learn. Binding is not generated. Let's see why it is not generated. Data binding class are not generated. Okay. Data binding is enabled. Right. Check whether we have to do the data binding. Check you converted to. Oh, okay. We have to convert the binding layout. That's the thing I forgot to do. Silly me. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is like, as I mentioned earlier, so sorry that I forgot that already. Okay, so when we want to make sure a binding is connected to this, we have to make sure um, this view, the XML itself is bindable. Okay, we have to make sure this is wrapped around the a layout class. Otherwise, this will won't work. That's what we did last time, but since we deleted it and it did not get created, so we have to make sure we are in under a layout, root layout. Okay. Next thing is put it under layout. Let's clean the project. Let's try to build it again. Attribute already specified. Okay, we don't need the XML space in the constraint layout. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, unresolved binding. Now we have to first check whether we have generated this. Let's undo this for a second. Was the layout template. So we have to make sure inflate. First one is dot layout dot fragment name. And, next thing is the first one is the root. How do I do a fragment initialization in the first place? I will create a new activity and see fragment bank. Just create a fragment. Okay, this is the template. No needed of that. I just need to make sure I don't have any errors within the application. Fragment made. Okay. Let's see whether it is building perfectly. Okay, application, it is running. Make sure I clean the project. And let me make the project again. This time we should be able to see the generated bindings, data bindings. Okay, there you go, finally. Okay, now, sorry about that, guys. I almost forgot this. So in order to make data binding accessible, make sure you wrap the XML layout within this layout attribute. Otherwise, the binding will not happen. So two things that you guys need to remember. First thing is the enable the data binding. So second one is make sure your resources, your layout is wrapped around an layout element. Otherwise, it will not work as well. So how do we know it is created successfully? So it will create this fragment main binding class for yourself. It is happening only if you created that correctly. Okay. So now what we have to do is we have to go into our on new create method, and we have to do the binding in here, data binding utils, inflate. Now the type it's in here, it's going to be fragment main binding. Okay, the type is that. The next thing that we need to provide is the what is the inflator. Okay, we have the inflator. What is the view? r.layout.fragment main. And the next thing is the parent. So it's going to be this container. And whether I'm going to attach him to the parent, and I'm going to say false. And with this section of code, we will get a binding. Okay, all right. Now with this binding, I can say binding dot root. Okay. We have to return it, otherwise it is wrong. So this binding that we have done, let's see whether it is still working. We run the application. Yes, it still works. See how you see at this why is that? Did I increase it by 2? View model. Sorry, Java, then UI main. Okay, I have plus it by 2. All right, sorry about that. And it's a quite thing that I forgot. Make sure you are in the layout, otherwise it won't work. Now you have done your binding in here, really simple. Rather than using the default inflator, that inflator inflating by default, we will use this data binding utils inflate method. And the next thing that you need to do is the auto-generated bindings. The auto-generated bindings that happens, the fragment.main binding, and who is the inflator, what is the view, who is the parent, whether it is attaching to parents or not. So that is done. And once it is done, we have to return the root. When we are calling this binding root, that means it is returning the this layout to display. Okay, so since it is the layout, it's going to be displayed around here. Now the next thing is that we need to do is we have to we can actually bind some of the values in here. For example, let's go to these binding section, and rather than depending on something like this, depending on view binding done by find view by ID, I will use this binding that we have used. So in order to use this, I need to make it a global variable. Let init var. I might name is I will name this as binding. So rather than val, I will say just binding, and it will have a global variable. So application worked as expected. Binding main fragment inflate. Yeah. Thank you. So next thing that we need to do is we can use this binding to find this text view. How are you going to do that? Let me remove this, and it's complaining the text view is no longer there. So what we can do is we can say binding dot root, no, text binding down. So we can go to the binding class and see whether what are the variables available there. Let's go to fragment binding. Let's go to generated class in here. Let's see how it is also in here. Yes, binding, set variable, execute binding. So we have something called message. The ID is message, so it's going to be referring to that. Okay, we don't need the view model. Let me go to the back. The ID is message, and the message have a text view. Okay, so make sure the binding is happening based on the name that you have given. So if you have given in here the main fragment, the ID that I have given for this text view within this layout is called message. So if I want to refer that directly, I can say binding.message.text, and let's see whether it is working. Yes, it is working as expected. Okay, so for example, if I want to listen to this count button, the button name, button ID is count button. So rather than I'm finding it by ID, I can say binding.count button. So I don't need to define this variable. Okay, and if I restart again, and it still works. So the binding is a new way of doing such thing. So you guys might thinking, okay, this is fancy way of doing things. So what is the true use case? What is like the one important thing that we can do around this? Why this is like a game changer or something like that? So the game changing mechanisms comes in a scenario where we can use the VM, the view model directly within the binding, directly within the XML itself. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Whenever we are doing the binding, we can say binding dot set binding dot view model. See binding dot view model is my data. The activity binding and okay. So for the next thing that we can do is we can directly refer the view model within our view itself in here. So how we going to define that? So we have the functionality, or we have the option defining a variable within the XML itself. Okay, so that's the thing that we're going to be doing. So can I format this? Refactor generate dimension. Was it control edit or something? Oh, not sure. Something related to that, but anyhow. So there is the new tag introduced in here called data, and within the data we can define variables. Okay, the variable name I'm going to be naming as view model. Okay, so the variable, whatever the name that you can give, it's up to you, but since I am referring the view model, I'm going to name it as view model as well. The type, since it is Kotlin and JavaScript, we can define the class of this view model. So it's going to be example dot test. Under test we have UI main, and we'll be using the main view model. So the view in here, this variable, the variable that we have named view model, it's gonna be directly the variable, it's going to be view model, and it's going to be a type of this main view model. Okay, so why this typing helps, let's see in a little bit why this kind of behavior is very good. And next thing that we can do is we can bind this view model within the within the code itself. Okay, so make sure when we are referring this variable in here, that does not create the view model itself and bind it in here. It is not the case. We are simply saying, hey, there will be a variable called view model, and its type's gonna be this, but we are not providing an instance of it. We are not providing a created view model for you. There will be something like this, and it will be in type of this. That's the only information that we give. We have not assigned any values to this view model. So the assignment happens within the initialization trace. Okay, so we can say binding view model. Now you can see there is a variable called view model, and we can say what is the view model that we are interested in. We can just say view model. Okay, this is the view model variable that we have created in here, initialized in here. And for the binding, okay, within the binding, you will find a view model class name view model. You can use that. Or for making things more simpler, I will just name this as VM, okay, to indicate view model. Now in here, you can't have something like binding.view model, but instead of VM, okay. So the value for the VM is going to be this view model that we have initiated in here. Okay, the naming convention. I have changed a little bit so you guys can understand clearly. Okay, now let's see whether the app breaks or not. Should not break. Okay, it's seems to be breaking. Most probably because it's because of the view model might not be initialized. Yes, I think I need to initialize the view model before the binding happens. Let's see that is the case. Okay, yes. So view model, we have binded in on create view method. Okay, so view model is there, and if you change this again, it is working. Nothing has changed. Right. So we have introduced a lot of codes in here. So we have introduced the binding, we have changed the view model. In the fragment, we have defined a variable and we have linked it in here. And now what we can do is we can do more. Okay, so you guys can see that we have this observable text in here. Okay, so we will be binding the message text view from the observable that we are getting from view model scope. So what we can do next is we can even bind that in here. So if I go to this text view, and if I say text, do I have defined the text? Yes, in here I have just defined main fragment. But what I can do here now is I have a variable. I have a variable called VM. So if it is not showing, you might put an @ sign in here. Is it here or there? Can't remember. Let me see the code again. Okay, the text view in here we have at equal, and we don't need this $sign. At equal, now I can say VM, and there is the variable called scope. Okay, maybe I need to convert it to string because it is it's getting an error. What is the error? Expression cannot be inverted, so increase cannot be inverted. Final. Maybe it's because of we are trying to go with the integer in here. Okay, I think you don't need the method. And if I, for now, I will disable this binding. Okay, that's disabled in here. I have say text VM score.toString. Let's see. The fragment. Let me clean the project. Build it again. Okay, binding error. I think what we are trying to do in here is not allowed. Let's do something like this. Let's go to score, and rather than it's being an integer, let me change it to a string. I'm not sure which that might be the case. I'm not sure. Okay, I will take the value. I think I can't do something like this. Let me check. Login view model. So the binding is not as expected at VS Code. Is it something related to binding? Let's see, it's complaining error. The expression, let's see what's the error is. So cannot be used in a two-way. Let's see what's the error is. Cannot be inverted. Why is giving that? Use var instead of well bounded. Okay. All right. It's gonna be depending on in this val. It should be var. I think that's the case. Let me undo this quickly. Rather than using var, you val use var because it's going to be changing. That is the main course, at least from where I stand to string. Let's try to build it again. No, still nothing. Yes, code out. To string. Probably the toString method is giving an error. So let me quickly go in here and with the view module, I will change the type to string. String, that's going to be a string as well. Let's see whether we can get it built again. Clean the project first of all and build it. Let's see, clean it again and build it again. Cannot find. Oops. Cannot find symbol fragment binding implementation. That means binding did not happen. There is no invisible for get value. We must add and okay. Observe the field. Let's see what else we can do. Oh. Okay, I have an extra. I think I had an extra, what do you call it? Integer. Okay, let me check it again. Scope, did I change anything? No, right? Mhm. Okay, view model. There should be a change in here. Give me a second, guys. String, and it's gonna be a string. It can be an int. Okay, no problem. Like data is okay. Possible. And it's gonna be 9. Start at 0. Underscore score dot value equals score plus 1, but I have to let's say value is, let's say, test colon. Want to make sure this is working. Yes, it's a string. Don't need this toString in here. Mine is not working. All right. Should be working. Android text. VM score. Okay, this is the value. Increasing should be working. Let's see whether this approach works, and then we can totally be sure whether it is. Yeah, the binding does not work. Let me undo these things for quick. This will be a wrong example. Integer, okay. Let me check it again. Dot to string. This is working not because of the binding that we are doing in here. The text binding that we are doing here, it is because of the value binding that we have done. Yes, this one works, but let's us, if I remove this, what will happen is the value is not changing. Okay, let's fix this. Okay, score to dot to string. Let's see whether this works. That means the initial value at least show. Okay, it is showing that in that scenario, we can assume that. So we have removed this binding code. Now the initial value shows up. That is a good sign. Initial values show up, but when I hit the count, it does not increase. Okay, let's debug. When we go to increase, and let's see whether it is increasing. Log D, and you can say main view model, and underscore score dot value. Right. Okay, let's run it again. Android. Okay, next value should be this. Message. Run it again. I have to go to my logcat. Yes, it seems to be the value is coming to the view model, but the fragment, it is not accepting this binding, the add binding. Let's see why it is not happening. Basically, if you want to value bind in MVVM, you just use @ sign. Okay, and two-way binding, you have to use, as I can remember, two-way binding, I have to use equals in here. But then again, it gives this error. To string. Go. Text view Android accepting life cycle live data. So again, let's change this to string. Let's say a0, whatever the value we have, integer dot in dot string dot pass. Int Kotlin pass int. See how it's done. Int okay. Wow. Okay, it says v score dot value to in. Seems easy. And I can say score is v dot plus by 1. We have to convert it back or into a string. Okay, score dot value. Let's see it again. Data binding error. Okay, let's see it again. It cannot be inverted. Method get value and then inverse method annotation to the method. Let's see. This method Kotlin data binding. Inverse, okay. Android text. Okay, I think I got the error. Let's go. We have to convert in this. Let's go. Let's see whether this works. No. Okay, I'm giving up on this. Let me at least try. I have to see why this is not working at the moment. I'm not sure. Okay, let's check. Try it again. Okay, at least this work. Now the count. Okay, I have find the. Let me revert back, guys. I'm not sure why this is not working. Okay, this is working. At least I try to get the click event handling. Okay. On click, then I can say at first thing I need to do is pass the variable in here. Okay, let me try to get the binding for the click event. So first one is at, then we have to follow by parentheses the event handler, and with the event handler I can say vm dot increase. Let me quickly remove this from here. At least let's see this one works. Okay, yeah. So I have to get back on why the text is not binding, but in here we can bind the click event. So if you guys can remember, I have this binding count button set on click listener. If I click on this, what will happen is I should call the view model increase. Now what I have done is I have removed this. Okay, I'm only listening to the text changes. I will get back why this is not working in the fragment itself. But for now, I think I have binded the count. So in here, if you guys can remember, we have the VM variable that is binded in the root section of here. And if I want to change this, if I want to do something on a click, so what we can do is can say Android on click, and this this at reference at symbol saying okay, this is not going to be simple values like this. It's going to be an reference, and whatever we need to do, if we have to execute within this curly braces, that is like something like that. We are annotating this as a method. Okay, and we can get the event itself, the button itself, but we are not interested in the button. We don't need anything to do with the button itself. So the so this parameter for the method, it is going to be empty. But when you click on it, what should happen is we are calling this method VM. VM is the variable that we have defined in here, and the VM have this increase method. Okay, it's calling this increase method. So that's in this scenario, it will be calling the VM increase method, and it will work as expected. So that's the reason behind in here that we define the type. Okay, so if you do not define the type, all you can see is that when you try to autocomplete in here, you won't get anything because we don't know what are the values within the VM. Now you can clearly see that there is this method called increase. You can call it as the increase, and it will automatically go and call that increase method. It will work the same. Now you guys can see how the binding that we are seeing in here, even the view model, you don't need to make it what do you call binded, or we don't need to make things in code itself. All the binding that is related to this can be done in the XML level as well. So make sure this binding is this binding is working only if you have this layout, root layout is there, as well as within the project itself in the build Gradle, data binding is enabled true. Otherwise, this won't work. That was the struggle that I was doing. So you guys don't have to do it again. And I think the two-way binding, for some reason, I'm not sure why it is not working. Normally, the way the behavior is something like this, the two-way binding. Something is changed, maybe, I'm not sure. I will get back on to you that as well. So you don't have to deal with this binding from your class as well. Everything can be binded directly within the XML itself. Okay, that's the idea behind this bindings that we can go over. Okay, so we have worked with the view model. So we have the view model. Next thing that we have to do is we have to use the model itself. The model may be somewhere we are getting data from, especially these values. If you guys can see that right now the value for the score is hard coded in here, but in a good application, the view model itself, it is not referring from the view model itself. It will have a data source like the model. We'll see how we can connect model in the next lecture. Then we will see how we can get data from either a network or from a database, whatever the data source that we are interested in. We can just get the data from there and populate in here. So ideally, when we are working with MVVM pattern, the differentiation has been made. So we have our view in here, the fragment and the KT file, which represent the view, and the view model is there. And all we need is the model. Let's see how we can go ahead with the model and how we can introduce model into our class. Okay, up until now, any questions, guys? If anyone is eager to learn or eager to try it out, try to get the text view binding as well. I was unable to get it for some reason. So you guys can test it out rather than view binding in here, do the view binding in the text view itself in here. Any questions up until this? No? Okay. So we'll conclude the lecture for today. Otherwise, the model, it's going to take a little bit time. We have to define the repositories and all. And I have to make sure the APIs have not changes. And the view model that you are seeing in here, it is based on XML and code. Okay, but there is unfortunately there is what you call new kid in the block, which do everything in code, which we call Android Compose. Yes, Android Compose. It is just like what we do in Flutter or Swift UI or something like that. There is only code views. So the fragment, the UI that we are defining in here, it's going to be totally on composable objects. So we'll look into that as well. But the theory behind Android MVVM architecture is, say for example, we are defining everything in XML in here. Yes, XML and Kotlin files. For some reason, if you think we don't normally need to use XML files anymore. So XML files anymore, we will be using Compose. You can definitely go ahead and remove this view layer. In here, we can remove these two files, and you can introduce Android Compose, and it will just work as fine. Okay, you have to define everything. I mean, you have to define these views and everything in Compose. But other than that, the logics and everything, it's going to be solid there. So you don't have to change anything. Only the view is going to be different. Okay, all right. If there is nothing else, we can wrap it up. If you guys found any questions, just let me know in the chat. And if you guys have found a way to like overcome the binding issue, two-way binding issue with the text view, go ahead and let us know in the chat as well. All right. Anything else? If there is nothing else, I can conclude, or I can give homework for you guys to testing. Think better I give a homework, so in that way you guys will practice these things as well. Let me think. Okay, all right. So the exercise is a very simple one. All you have to do is you have to have edit text view. That means the text input that you will see. What you have to do is when you are typing in the edit text, and it should reflect the value in the text view. Okay, so when you are typing in something in the input text, it should reflect on the text view, like what we have done in here. Anyone have any question on the assignment? All you have to do is when you are typing, whatever you type in, it should be displayed on a text view, but it should be in MVVM. Okay, you can't use what do you call a normal binding, MVVM binding. Is it clear?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay, all right, cool. Okay, until that, see you guys next time.